Okay, let's unpack this. Be honest. Have you ever stared at a rental contract, felt your eyes glaze over by page 2, and just thought, what am I even signing?
Uh-huh.
You are definitely not alone. That feeling of wading through dense legal jargon, that whole stack of documents, it's universal. And honestly, sometimes it feels like you're just crossing your fingers hoping for the best.
That's so true. And it turns out even the professionals, the people actually in the real estate world, they grapple with these exact same complexities.
Right. It's a field where clarity isn't just like nice to have, it's absolutely essential. It has real consequences.
Absolutely.
And today, we're taking a deep dive into some source material you shared with us, focusing specifically on Japan. Japan, known for its incredible attention to detail, its systems, its rigor, and that definitely extends to its rental market. Our sources look closely at a key organization there, the Japan Association of Rental Housing Management, known as JARM.
Yeah, JARM. It's essentially like a central hub for the rental housing industry in Japan. It's the place where professionals turn when they hit tricky situations or, need guidance on actually implementing regulations.
And the sheer volume of consultations they get is it's just staggering. Our source points out that in 2024 alone, that's Reiwa 6 in Japan, JARM handled over 4,300 rental-related consultations from the industry.
Wow.
That number right there tells you these aren't rare edge cases. These are common, complex issues that professionals are seriously wrestling with day to day.
It really shows the scale of the questions and the constant need for professional support for interpreting the rules as things change.
So among those thousands of consultations, we're zooming in on just one today, the hashtag 10 ranked topic on JARM's list for 2024. And this one is fascinating because, well, at first glance, the title sounds incredibly simple.
The topic is rental contract intermediation.
Right, rental contract intermediation. Your first thought might be, okay, well, that's just the broker connecting a landlord and a tenant, helping them sign the lease. What's so complex about that?
But here's where it gets really interesting and where our source really digs in. The core problem, the thing driving all those consultations, isn't just the general act of intermediation.
Okay.
The overwhelming number of questions for this hashtag 10 topic are specifically about how to correctly write the important matters explanation document.
The Juusetsusho. The source calls it the Juusetsusho, and they call it a major boss-level document in Japan's real estate process.
And for very good reason. This isn't just some checklist you tick off. It's a deep dive into the property's history and, crucially, a disclosure of legal risks specific to that unit or building. Think of it like getting the property's full background check and a detailed legal disclaimer before you even think about signing the actual lease.
And there's a strict legal requirement tied to this in Japan. Our source highlights that a nationally qualified professional, someone called a Takuchi Datamono Torihikishi, which is sort of like a licensed real estate broker or agent.
Right.
They aren't just required to give you this document in writing. They must also explain it verbally, point by point, to the prospective tenant before that tenant puts pen to paper on the lease contract.
Yes, that mandated verbal explanation is absolutely key. It's there to ensure the tenant isn't just handed this complex, maybe intimidating document, but actually has a structured chance to understand what's in it and ask questions directly to someone qualified.
Okay, so what kind of things are actually buried in this major boss Juusetsusho? The source gives us a pretty comprehensive list.
Yeah, it covers the physical condition of the property, or their structural issues, maybe a history of leaks, even details like, exposed rebar.
Exposed rebar, wow.
Yeah, and it also delves into any legal rights tied to the property, like existing mortgages, for instance.
And they have to tell you about the neighborhood, too, like surrounding facilities, things you might not want nearby, like garbage plants or cemeteries.
Exactly, undesirable facilities. Then, naturally, it covers the contract specifics, the exact rent, deposit, any management fees, the conditions for renewing or ending the lease, and rules about things impacting daily life, like whether pets are allowed or if you can play musical instruments.
Okay, standard stuff. But then it gets into what the source calls special disclosures. This is where things like psychological defects come in.
Properties with a history the Japanese call jikobuken, which could include things like suicides or homicides that happen there. They also need to disclose any doubts about, say, soil contamination.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So these are details that could seriously affect a tenant's safety, their comfort, their legal standing. Getting any part of this document wrong or leaving something important out, it's not a minor slip-up.
Not at all. And the source is very clear about the consequences. Errors or omissions are often the root cause of significant disputes down the line.
Like what kind of disputes?
We're talking arguments over who pays for repairs, tenants demanding lower rent, or wanting to break the lease altogether, claims for damages, even lawsuits.
So for the professionals involved, this isn't just a headache.
Oh no. It costs real money, it can severely damage their reputation, and potentially, it puts their professional licenses at risk.
Which explains why this hashtag 10 consultation topic is ranked so high then. It's not about brokering in general. It's really about the huge professional responsibility and risk tied to this one specific critical document.
Precisely. And the source clarifies who is asking whom these questions. It's the real estate brokerage businesses, the brokers on the front lines facing clients doing these mandatory explanations.
Yeah.
They are the ones consulting the rental housing management businesses. The management company is asking for guidance on how to rate the Juusetsusho correctly.
Okay, hold on. That's really interesting. So the people who have to explain the document are asking the people who know the property inside out for help writing the very document they need to explain.
Exactly that. And this dynamic, it really highlights a significant characteristic of the Japanese market that the source points out. This pretty clear division of labor between the management side and the brokerage side.
Can you tell us a bit more about those roles, how the source describes them?
Sure. So the management companies, think of them as the landlord's property and asset managers. They handle the day-to-day maintenance, talking to tenants, collecting rent. Crucially, they're usually the ones who draft or heavily influence the standard lease contract templates. They hold the deep, ongoing knowledge about the property's history, its specific issues, maintenance records, all the relevant regulations. They're the source of the raw data, if you will, for the Juusetsusho.
Okay, they know the building
Yeah.
and the brokerage companies.
They're the market connectors, the matchmakers. Their main job is finding tenants, showing properties, negotiating the terms. But then when it comes time to sign the lease, their key legal responsibility shifts to being the informer. They're the ones legally required to sit down, deliver, and explain that complex Juusetsusho.
Okay, so it makes perfect sense then why a broker would consult the management side or a body like JRM. Why else would they need that external guidance specifically on writing the document? What makes it so tricky?
Well, think about it. Brokers deal with an incredibly diverse range of properties. Every single one has its own unique history, its quirks, its legal baggage. Plus, they have to keep up with constantly changing regulations. How do you correctly disclose the impact of new energy efficiency standards on an older building? Or what level of detail do you need to provide about a past issue, maybe a neighbor dispute that got resolved? These aren't just general knowledge questions. They need specific property info and, crucially, an expert interpretation of disclosure rules.
I see. So the consultation really reflects the brokers being, well, understandably cautious about their legal liability. They know getting this document right is critical, and it also shows a respect for the specialized knowledge that the management side holds.
Precisely. They recognize that, okay, maybe they are the experts in market matching and client relations, but the management side has that deep property-specific knowledge that's absolutely essential for accurate, legally sound disclosure in the Juusetsusho.
Now, our source also offers a quick contrast with how this might play out in, say, Taiwan. It mentions Taiwan has similar legal requirements for tenant protection documents, and the law does distinguish between brokerage and rental service businesses.
Right. Legally, the distinction exists. However, the source points out that in practice, many companies or even individuals in Taiwan offer more of a one-stop shop service. They handle both finding the tenant and the ongoing management.
So the lines are maybe a bit more blurred there compared to Japan.
Exactly. Which impacts where brokers might go for help?
How so?
Well, the source suggests that when Taiwanese brokers have questions about their equivalent documents, like a rental property status confirmation form or real estate explanation document, they're probably more likely to consult their own internal legal team or maybe senior colleagues within their company or perhaps government regulatory bodies.
Okay.
The source notes it's just less common for them to routinely turn to a specific management sector association for detailed guidance on, the nitty-gritty of writing these disclosure forms. It's not saying one is better or worse professionally, just highlighting a difference in market structure and maybe established habits for seeking expertise.
That's a really fascinating difference. It seems like the Japanese structure almost pushes them towards consulting the specialized entity, the one with the deepest property knowledge. So, okay, stepping back from the Juusetsusho itself, what does this whole hashtag 10 rank topic and the market structure it reveals actually Tell us about the bigger picture. What's the so what here?
Well, the source outlines some pretty significant benefits that come out of this meticulous process and these clear roles. They talk about the social benefits, or shakajitsueki in Japanese.
Social benefits. Okay, what does that look like in practice?
Well, one key benefit is how it elevates the overall industry professionalism and service quality. Think about it. When brokers have to clarify every detail and they actively seek guidance to write the Juusetsusho correctly, it kind of forces the entire industry to focus more on compliance and accuracy. And that rigor ultimately benefits the consumer, the tenant.
Right, it sounds like it creates a higher baseline standard across the board.
It does. And perhaps most importantly, it more effectively protects tenant rights. An accurate, thoroughly explained Juusetsusho is really the foundation of a tenant's right to know. Getting all that crucial information up front lets tenants make genuinely informed decisions about where they're going to live.
Which ideally prevents those awful surprises later on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And reduces the chance of tenants suffering financial loss or just having really unpleasant living experiences.
And I imagine that also leads to fewer problems for everyone involved down the track, fewer arguments.
Precisely. By laying everything out transparently and explaining it clearly before the contract is signed, you head off and significantly reduce the number of, frankly, unnecessary rental disputes. So many arguments just stem from misunderstandings or missing information right at the start.
And there was one more benefit you mentioned linked to the consultation process itself, with JJRM collecting all these questions.
Yeah, that process promotes industry self-regulation and standardization. JRM sees these thousands of questions. They identify the most common pain points, the areas of confusion across the whole industry.
Okay.
They can then use that feedback, this real-world practice problem data, to develop better guidelines, improve training for professionals, and even suggest necessary changes to the law if needed. It creates this really valuable cycle. Practical challenges drive industry-wide improvement and standardization.
That makes a lot of sense. The questions themselves help refine the rule book and the training. But of course, the source also cautions about potential risks if this process doesn't work as intended. What are the downsides if, say, brokers get lazy, don't consult, or maybe the info they get isn't quite right?
Right, the source points out what they term potential risks, or senzai teki no rusuku.
Potential risks. What's the most immediate one that comes to mind?
The most direct risk is just plain harm to tenant rights. If crucial information about a problematic property gets left out or misrepresented in the Juusetsusho, maybe because a broker didn't know or didn't bother to ask a tenant, could end up renting a place with serious issues. Issues affecting their safety, their quality of life, maybe leading to financial loss.
Yeah, that's serious. And for the professionals themselves, what are the risks?
For them, there's a significant risk of legal trouble lawsuits, substantial economic compensation. Disputes from faulty disclosures are incredibly costly. Think legal fees, time away from business, potential damages paid out. It hits their bottom line hard, impacts their reputation, and could even lead to them losing their professional license.
And if these kinds of failures happen often enough, it damages something even bigger, right?
Yes, absolutely. A major potential risk is a decrease in overall market trust. If consumers keep hearing stories about problems cropping up because of unclear or incomplete Juusetsusho documents, they inevitably lose faith in the integrity of the whole real estate and rental industry. That lack of trust is really damaging to the market's long-term health.
So, wow. What starts as a seemingly simple question about how to write a specific document ranked #10 on an industry consultation list actually opens up this deep connection to legal responsibility, professional ethics, consumer protection, the very structure of the market, and the overall health of the entire ecosystem.
Japan's really meticulous approach to this Juusetsusho document and this continuous loop of learning and consultation highlighted by JRM's ranking system, it's definitely noteworthy. It demonstrates a really strong emphasis on transparency and legal compliance.
It's just fascinating how digging into just one data point from an industry's list of worries can unveil so much about its inner workings and its priorities. It really makes you think about how different markets organize themselves to handle these critical points where things can go really right or really wrong.
Absolutely. And based on the insights from the source material, it kind of leads us to some questions for you, the listener, to consider as you reflect on this deep dive.
Yeah, first, what do you think of Japan's model, this high degree of specialization between the brokerage role and the rental management role?
Second, thinking about that emphasis on consultation between these specialists for writing detailed documents. Do you think a model like that could realistically work in your local market context? What might need to change for it to function?
Third, if you compare the two approaches, what advantages do you see, and maybe what areas for improvement in a more one-stop shop service model, where one company handles both brokerage and management versus this more specialized Japanese approach?
And finally, just thinking about your own experiences renting. Have you ever run into issues because information about the property felt unclear or maybe incomplete? Did you feel like you had the full picture before you signed?
It's definitely a powerful reminder that clarity and communication, especially for something as fundamental as where you live, is just so crucial for everyone involved. We really encourage you to ponder those questions.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.